2 o'clock, January 9th, 2024. Can you believe it? I mean, where has the year gone? I'm James Melton, Chief Ambassador of the Mars Society, and our Mars Society Ambassador program is designed to serve as a professional team of people dedicated to elevating public awareness of our mission to land humans on Mars within this decade and begin settling the red planet. No little task there. So I want to thank you all for your thoughts on the article that I wrote on how important being a Mars Society ambassador is. Extremely important. And how many of you got the article? I'm not asking if you read the article, but you received the article. Okay. I hope I expressed myself clearly in that. You are very much appreciated. What you're doing is critical to our world and the continuation. I don't want to get too grand on this, but the continuation of our civilization. And you, among others, maybe, but mostly you, and I'm admitting people as we're talking here, are extremely aware of this because the Mars Society is focused on the future, and that's important. So at any time during this talk, feel free to jump in at any time. We are going to be talking about 7 reasons why we must go to Mars. Now, I shared this with you in an email, the Mars Ambassador briefing link. And these are my ideas. Now, you have your own ideas. You might want to revamp this and send them to me with your take on it. And I would appreciate that. But 7 reasons I have, and I put 0 being one of the reasons, which actually makes 8. I mean, bring Emmanuel from West Africa in. Hi, Kai, glad to have you on board. So the 0-hour limited time to resolve our earthly issues touches every aspect of the 7 points. The first point that I listed, of course, is the unwillingness. By the way, I want to distinguish that from not the inability, but the unwillingness to talk to other countries. Now, Dr. Zubrin used that as the closing point for his 2022 convention in Tempe, Arizona. How many of you attended the Tempe, Arizona program in 2022? All right. Then the next one I listed was prejudice, which is, these are all topics which can be debated ad infinitum. A few common examples of prejudice are those based on someone's race, gender, religion, nationality, social status, sexual orientation, and affiliations with organizations that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with. And prejudice is a kind of an ugly thing. So we can talk about this a little bit during the program. Political polarization. Goodness knows our world is being polarized with our not only our governments but other governments, and the dissidence going on in our world is grand, and I'd like to say glorious, but it's not grand and glorious. It's grand and uncomfortable. Okay, curiosity, or I probably should have written it more clearly. Lack of curiosity is one of the reasons, and we'll talk about that too. Pollution. Well, this could have been included in global climate disruption, population, excuse me. I could have both lumped together with global climate disruption with pollution and the population. We can just discuss that a little bit. And then the cosmic catastrophe. I listed these in order of magnitude because in my eyes, the least issue on the list would be an asteroid hitting our Earth. Now, not meaning to say it's not going to happen. It can't happen. There are asteroids out there, but we have asteroid seekers and new ones going up and will be operative in 2028. We have plenty of people searching for unidentified flying objects far out there off Earth. Here comes Steve Wyatt from England. All right, he's hopefully on now. And cosmic catastrophes, although they can happen, it's highly unlikely. How many saw the movie Don't Look Up? Anybody see that movie? That was an interesting movie, very interesting. Another one is out recently, Leave the World Behind. I believe that's with Julia Roberts and Ray Gosling. That has another element of how we can be disrupted as a civilization. So we can talk about all of those things. Now, if I might start out with, I'm not a scientist. Many of you know that. I'm just a curious guy looking for ways that we can enhance our living environment on Earth and beyond. And Dan and I were in Palm Springs for the last 3 days, and we received a video from a friend of ours. It was about Mars. And I watched the video while I was gathering some things together to come up the mountain. And to my surprise, the video was a video that I had watched years ago where I was first introduced to Dr. Robert Zubrin. And as I was watching that video, I put it on pause. I ran into the office. I linked on to the Mars Society website, joined the Mars Society, and went back to watch the rest of the movie. Now, this is something that you do when you go out to touch the lives of other people. They hear you, they see you, they kind of get to know who you are, either virtually or in person is always good. But when you talk, people listen, because what you're sharing with these people is something that's really in demand. They just don't know it. The general public just doesn't know much about Mars and our space endeavors. So the bulk of this video, the focus of this video, and I wrote it down because it's so profound. Life is too precious to leave it all on one planet. And I may be coming back to this time and again, but please ask questions about that. Einstein put it this way. He said, the world won't be destroyed by people who do evil, but by those who watch them and do nothing. Kind of like a statement from Martin Luther King. The worst thing people could do can happen is when good men do nothing. So why are we going to Mars? What is the reason for that? And I was I was in the Army a while back, and my state, Wisconsin, was activated for the Berlin crisis. And they took the whole state. In order to take one person out of the National Guard, which we were in, they had to take the whole state. Well, they really wanted me. So they took the whole state. And they also took the state of Texas and activated us for 2 years. And it just so happened that the Green Bay Packers, most of them were in the National Guard, and they were all taken for the Berlin crisis as well. Got to know these guys very well. As a matter of fact, Paul Herning and I Board Dollar was there, Bart Starr, the quarterback of the Packers at the time, and Paul and I took a little projector around the battalion to all the companies, and we showed videos of Vince Lombardi's leadership strategies. And they were all riveted because everyone at the time knew Vince Lombardi, and many people here don't know much about football. You're more into soccer, which is probably where we are moving to, but many people don't know who Vince Lombardi is. But he was a very riveting, focused man, a coach of the Green Bay Packers. And his concept was to keep your eye on the goal. He said, we are dealing with nothing but distance and time. And our objective is the goalpost. So the way he put it is this. How can we best mitigate risk? And this has to do with the 7 steps on 7 elements of why we need to go to Mars. He said, if we can advance 3 yards at a time in our first, second, and third down, we will make our first down of 10 yards. Forgive me if you're not into football and you don't know the tricks and back stories of football. I do apologize to you from other countries, but just bear with me for a moment. And then once we make our 10 yards, we can do it all again, 3 yards at a time. He said, but we must at least go 3 yards on each play. So if we strive to get a minimum of 4 yards per play, that leaves us 2 plays to go with only 2 yards to make, increasing our odds substantially. Now that sounds very doable, he said. With the Mars effort, we're dealing with distance and time also. And how can we mitigate our risks by going to Mars? We're dealing with distance, time, gravity, atmosphere, and cost. So the 7 reasons of going to Mars play into this quite a bit. Again, I say life is too precious to leave it to one planet. So I'm going to start backwards. Point number 7. The 7th step is cosmic catastrophe. I mentioned the movie Don't Look Up and Leave the Earth Behind and that sort of thing. But there are several cosmic catastrophes that can occur. One would be an asteroid. Another might be an asteroid hitting Earth, like it did with the era of the dinosaurs. I think that was about, what was it, 60 million years ago, something like that.
66, yeah.
Was it 60 million years?
66, yeah.
66 million years, all right. I'll leave it to you, Nasser, that's good. And another would be maybe a solar flare, which can disrupt communication, etc. Give me some others that you think might be applicable to go into that list. Anyone?
Yeah, I would add something. Personally, I think any natural catastrophe would be the least thing we'd be looking for. I think more harmful things would be like global warming, or we could say like a nuclear war, or self-inflicted sort of a catastrophe. So yeah, I would rate that thing on a higher note. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Who else?
EMP.
What's that, John?
An electromagnetic pulse, either from the sun or man-made from a nuclear bomb.
Okay, and that's excellent. So what else might be an issue in that area? How about our sun expanding? I mean, our sun dying out, that would be one. I mean, we are, I guess you might say, ask yourself what's the biggest threat to the human experience? And you probably think it would be nuclear war, it might be global warming, it might be large-scale pandemic disease. But assuming that we can overcome these such things, we have to ask ourselves, are we really safe? And I agree with Nasser. It's probably the last thing on the list. I mean, we talk about solar flares, we talk about asteroids, a gamma burst, moving stars, nearby supernovas, things of that sort. Those are all elements that can go into it. Anyone else want to add to the list?
Well, I was just going to mention, if any star within 50 light years goes supernova, that would probably do it.
Within
Not
50.
likely,
Yeah, but
not likely, but
from my understanding, we don't have a star within 50 light years that's going to go supernova anytime soon.
correct. But we don't always know how close stars are to that supernova stage.
That's
So,
true. That's
yeah.
true, Dean. Yeah. All right. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Well,
Ed, go ahead.
I think, excuse me, I think 0.7 really ties in with 0 hour. The problem with all these problems, and they're big, serious problems we face in the world right now, is that the Mars Society in and of itself really isn't designed to solve those problems. Those are a lot of issues, and very important issues. The possibility of nuclear war.
Hmm.
There are some people who advocate in China, Russia, and the United States who thinks, well, a nuclear war, no problem. We got really good big nukes. We can win that. We can drive the Chinese and the Russians and anyone else who doesn't like me. We can drive them into the ground and we'll survive and we'll live happily ever after. There are some nutcases out there who think that. We in the Mars Society, there are things we can't control. Obviously, if there's a supernova, we just ran on luck. Nothing we can do about that. If it's only 10, 20 light years away, we're toast on our planet. Global warming, that's something we can deal with. Not the Mars Society, but a lot of people who are in all kinds of organizations with different views can deal with that. I think we're a focused, single issue, basically organization focused on Mars, focused on getting human explorers to Mars, focused on us as a Mars Society helping to get them, including some of us probably, to Mars. And we have within our organization people with many different views on issues like global warming, a war. Well, there are some issues that we're all united on outside of Mars. For example, bigotry. We are against bigotry of any kind.
Yeah.
Against anti-Semitism, anti-Black, anti-women. We are not bigots. We don't have any bigots in the Mars Society. That would be very uncomfortable in our organization because we're not bigots.
Exactly. And this of course all falls under the umbrella of prejudice.
Right.
You brought up a good point though, and that's I jotted down some notes here. Do we go to the moon first or do we go to Mars first? And we're talking about can't leave it all on one planet. We're too precious to leave it all on one planet.
Priority.
Some of these issues that we're talking about, like supernovas, et cetera, would not only destroy our planet, but it would destroy the solar system. So that's something to consider. But going to the moon or Mars, Ashton, you had a wonderful podcast last time with what was the gal's name? Shauna?
Dr. Shauna Pandya.
Yeah, yes. And she gave some very good points. She said several reasons that how we can mitigate the risk of going to Mars by simply going to the moon. I wrote down some notes on that. She said, we're talking about gravity, atmosphere, distance, and cost. And how do we mitigate these items? Now, Robert Zubrin, of course, is all Merlin engines or Raptor engines going to Mars, which is
Mars.
Mars Direct, which is an excellent idea. But how can we mitigate our risks in going to Mars? One would be by going to the moon. And we have a challenge of no atmosphere on the moon and minimal atmosphere on Mars. Only 1% of Earth's atmosphere is on Mars. So they're both very weak on atmosphere. We have about 1/6 the gravity on the moon and 1/3 the gravity of Earth on Mars. We have a distance issue whereby our communication to the moon is 1.5 seconds. Our communication to and back on Mars would be anywhere between, would it be 10 minutes to 45 minutes. We have issues that if something goes wrong, can we get the people back? Well, a round trip to the moon is basically going to be about 6 days. One way is 3 days, as opposed to 6 to 7 months to Mars. Makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, and Ed, you're real right on this. The Mars issue needs to be handled because our timing, as you pointed out, and I did on that one very 0 point, limited time to resolve our earthly issues. So why don't we, I'm sure we are, but why don't we really focus on both? We can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we can have different initiatives. Let's talk about that for a second, because some people are very inflexible about the moon and they feel we just don't need to go there. But we can build a moon base there. We can, in fact, handle some of those issues on the moon, would make it incredibly easier. Once we solve it on the moon, we can certainly handle it on Mars. Give me your thoughts on that. Moon or Mars?
Are we not
Yeah,
already committed?
Steve, go ahead, Steve.
Are we not already committed to going to the moon? If you look at the way that NASA has arranged their space program,
Yes.
we're already going there. So, as a major player in the stakes for getting to Mars, I'm not saying that we have to follow them, but they've kind of got the money, and we've got to go with them anyway. So, I think trying to get to Mars direct, which I'm inclined to agree is something that we could achieve, and so if we can achieve it, why don't we do it? But unfortunately, from our point of view, we're already committed to going to the moon.
Okay, other thoughts, Ed?
Well, and not just us, China. I
Indeed.
think China, in all likelihood, is going to get explorers on the moon before SLS, before NASA. Today it was announced SLS will not be going around the moon with a couple astronauts until the fall of 2025, next year, another delay. The SLS, as it's become apparent, the SLS which is based on 1980s technology, or really they say it's an upgrade. Okay, 1990s technology, the SLS will not be going to Mars. And there are some serious doubts about whether we'll ever get even to the moon. And the astronauts, I think, have serious doubts about going on the SLS right now, which is one of the reasons for the delay. They want to make sure that when they go around the moon, it's actually a round trip, that they'll be coming home safely. So most people are putting their money on, and if I were a betting person, I put my money on the Starship getting to Mars and the moon before SLS. And I hope we get to the moon. I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah,
But for me, the Mars is just a far more interesting celestial body than the moon.
thank you, Ed. It was Jim Bridenstine who was the administrator of NASA a few years ago, before Nelson, and he was at SpaceX, and he was talking with Musk about his testing and flying process, which he really admired. NASA can't really do it the same way because of the funding that comes from the general public, but the private enterprise, see, NASA's process is to test, fix, and fly, or thereabouts. SpaceX's process is fly, fix, test, fly, fix. So not that they're not concerned about losing a vehicle, certainly they won't be quite as soft on holding back when they have a crew on board, but NASA and SpaceX have two different philosophies on how to approach these things. So yeah, I would say, as we're talking about cosmic catastrophes, global climate disruption, which I like to call it rather than global warming. It's gotten a bad rap with global warming because people don't understand it. Just like defunding the police. If they rename that, reappropriation might be easier and better to call it. But the way we say things and the way people hear things, it's kind of like the old phrase, I know you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. So we build up cases all the time against items that we're doing, and it's very difficult to dissuade a fixed mind. All right, moving on, the population aspect. Let's go to that. Coming down the chain of command here. I think it was back in 1959 when we went to the 69 when we went to the moon. We had about 3 billion people on the planet. We now have 8 billion people according to the statistics. Last year, November 16th, we clicked the clock to 8 billion people. The Census Department tells us that by the year 2050, we'll have 10 billion people on the planet. Now, any statistics that I've read, and correct me if you've read something other than this, the maximum capacity for the human species on the planet is about 10 billion, maybe 10.5 billion. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Emma.
It's a very valid point, isn't it? We are going to run out of room eventually.
Yes. Emma, you had something?
I just want to add, actually, I think a lot of that has to do with first world versus poorer countries. And you can't just say that a population is necessarily going to be the problem. I think it's the first world's appetite for consumerism, for exploitation of the poorer countries, and for this demand for technology. And I actually think it's almost like another point that this demand for advanced technology, evolving technologies, we're using resources that we just don't have. And it's just turning into a ridiculous pillage of the earth almost. But it's just such a small, I would say, a small portion of the Earth's population that's responsible for that. So if it weren't for these first world appetites, we'd probably find a much slower progress when it comes to climate change and pollution. considering the larger population, which are actually quite in sync with nature generally, and they're not so destructive. I'm talking very generally, but that's my thought. I think technology and this demand for resources like lithium ion, we're having to venture out into space, over to planets like Mars, just to find the resources to fund the technology that we want to use now.
Yes, yes. I think it's John Attenborough who put it this way: all our environmental problems become easier to solve with fewer people, and harder and ultimately impossible to solve with ever more people or even more people. And the population distribution is getting a little unequal. You're finding that the more educated populace are having less children, and more children seem to be born in areas where it's very difficult for families to maintain those families. So this is another reason, very powerful reason, why we need to go to Mars. Just as you have criteria to enter Harvard, criteria to be a pilot, criteria certainly to be an astronaut or an astronaut, criteria to do a job, criteria to be a president, to be a congressperson, a senator, whatever that might be. You need to have some skills. That will also be a requirement for going to Mars. And there will be a small group of people that will be going there. It's not going to be something huge. So that will be the core of what we're thinking the environment and the civilization, the society should be built upon. Another reason for going soon is I'm a believer we need to go fast and first. Because there are a lot of countries, bless their hearts, who have a totally different vision of how things need to be run. I mean, let's take China, let's take India, let's take the European Union, let's take United Arab Emirates. Let's talk about a communist country versus a democracy. Let's talk about that without, it's a political issue, but you have to agree that those who get there first will probably have dominance over the planet, or could very well have that. Does that concern anyone?
Yeah, this John, just it makes a difference between being run as a military operation versus a commercial operation. It kind of gets down to that, I think.
Yes, yes. And I don't deny at all that one of the major reasons to develop a moon base will end up being military combined with civil, but largely military. And we do have the 1967 Space Treaty. I think only 45 had ratified that. Maybe that's more now, but you can't force someone to do something other than what their beliefs are. I mean, we don't necessarily want the whole world to be a democracy. We want people to do what they need to do. But when we're going to another planet and we're starting a new civilization, I don't know if you read Alvin Toffler and his wife's book called Creating a New Civilization. But it's an excellent book, and it's certainly worth reading. So thinking about that, I don't know about you, but I get up in the morning, I don't just think about what's for breakfast. I kind of like to think about what's the world going to be doing 10 years from now, and will we even have breakfast? So There you go. All right. Curiosity. Let's talk about curiosity for a minute, or rather the lack of it. We are a curious lot. We are Homo sapiens. I mean, we are distinctively different from other animals on the planet. I mean, we are different, for sure. Now, if you want to get people talk about blacks, whites, religions. They talk about different ethnicities, different cultures, and talking about it is really different. But when you come down to the DNA chain, it's fascinating to see this. The DNA chain of the Homo sapiens, to get 1% difference from us would be an orangutan or a chimpanzee. Everything else is the same. To get 2% different from us in our DNA chain, it would be a gorilla. And we are so much alike as individuals, and I'm not sure we all realize this. We do as Mars Society ambassadors, because I think we've opened up our minds a little bit more. But when you think about this, the studies are that 0.1% of our Homo sapien population, we're all within that 0.1% difference. And of that 0.1% difference, being it color, language, culture, so when you really come down to it, we're really all the same people. How can we emphasize that we are all one? I like the idea of having differences. Emma and Steve, I love, and both Steve, I love your be able to speak English and not American. It sounds so sophisticated. We in America look toward you as an elevated source of speech, admirably. And we look to other countries, and we look at the French people as food aficionados and artists and romance and things like that. And these cultures are excellent, but when we start distinguishing ourselves as better than rather than different from, that can be a problem, especially as Robert says, when you're traveling in a tuna can on the way to Mars, we've got to learn to live together. That's what our MDRS programs are all about. Certainly technology, but I'm all about the human factor and how will we relate to one another. All right, curiosity. Why don't you think a lot of people are curious? Why do most people like to talk about themselves rather than other people? How many people have you met when, soon as you're introduced, seconds later, we forget their name? That's probably because we're thinking about what we're going to say, as opposed to really listening. Listening is an art, it's a real skill. And to get someone's 100% attention is a real challenge. But listening we must do if we're an ambassador. And we need to listen to our audiences. Listening is a key ingredient. I talked about this a few months ago on the podcast. So any other thoughts on curiosity? That's a pretty broad subject, I know. But I'm looking for your thoughts.
I think the more that you see, the more curious you get. When I think about how I look up at the stars, and I look at things online these days that show us some of the amazing things that are out there in the cosmos, it just increases my curiosity. It was curiosity that made me look in the first place. But the more I look, the more I see, and the more I want to see. So I think one of our jobs is to try and get people to look and listen, obviously, about what it is that's out there. And these are things that we can show them that they haven't even thought to even take a look at yet. So the more we can introduce everyone else to what we know and what we like to look at, I think the more curious they'll get. I'd like to think so anyway. It certainly works for me.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I really think that's true. Do you know the world that you are opening to other people as a Mars Society ambassador? The world that you're opening, a world they have never, in the mainstream, have never even seen. And many have never thought about it. People talk, I like what Robert Rubin says. Yes, people talk about the world being a small world, but we have an infinite sky. So we're really touching other galaxies. We're touching maybe even other universes, maybe other time zones. And our civilization is minuscule compared to the immensity of the galaxy and the universe. And how many times has this happened in our universe? People always talking about, are we alone? Are there aliens? Well, you have to put the time factor in there as well. What time are you talking about? Are you talking about 1 billion years ago? Are you talking about 2 billion years ago in the galaxy when we never even existed? You know, what are we talking? Are we talking about the future history of our galaxy, the future of our galaxy, when other civilization will form and diminish? You know, so you know, yes, would I say there are other people, other aliens out there? Yeah, definitely, I would say that. If there weren't, there certainly will be, because we have more time ahead of us, I think, than we have behind us. So thoughts on that before we leave that subject? Ed, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, excuse me. There are two huge things we want to find out. The Mars Society members and a few billion other people want to find out the answer. One, has there been, or is there even today, life on Mars? Microbes, whatever, any life. Question two, and hopefully we'll get an answer to this before this century is over. Is there other intelligent life out there? Or are we alone in this huge, with trillions and trillions of habitable planets, probably around trillions of suns? Are we it? Well, that whole idea, I think, is ridiculous. I mean, are we so focused on our species that we're it? This whole huge, that's it, we're alone. No. And we're going to answer both of those questions, I think, within the next decade or two. The first, once we will be on Mars, we'll find out, we'll know, probably within the next decade or so, the first human scientists, explorers at our first scientific settlements, we may get a concrete and I think probably positive answer to that. Yes, there was life, or may still be in life. The second one, and this is interesting, in the past few years, and I've been absolutely amazed by this, and this is maybe a little bit off subject, but it's on our minds. We're thinking, we're talking about it. Life elsewhere, intelligent life. The whole UFO thing. The government and a lot of politicians and a growing number of scientists are taking this seriously. We don't have any evidence at all, hard evidence.
Yeah, I mean,
at least that's been that we're being visited by aliens. I wish that were true, and maybe there's a 1% possibility, maybe more. I don't know, but on that, put it in the hands of the scientists.
Sure,
The scientists can figure it out. Let the scientists figure it out, and and given the tools they need to study this phenomena, and give them the tools, form an international panel. Let them decide, take it out of the hands of Congress, the politicians, the military, turn everything over to the scientists, and we'll get an answer on that.
Probably so. And I believe that as a Mars Society member, I think our focus is on discovering life elsewhere. Is it a random factor or is it chemical evolution? And that alone will answer a huge question for sure. So, all right, let's go to, well, let's not
Jim,
go.
can I raise a point there?
Oh, please, yes,
Okay.
Ashley.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit from adults. Obviously, all of us in this room, we're curious. We know that. That's what brings us all together. My focus as an ambassador, besides the podcast, has been focusing on K through 12 kids and students and getting them interested in space and exploring the universe, particularly Mars. And so something that I struggle with is getting them to be curious. How do I spark that within them? It's hard to get them to look up to the sky sometimes and have those thoughts to themselves. Are we alone in the universe? Is there other life? How did we get here? Ask them those questions when they're looking down at their phone on a little screen, and that's where they get most of their excitement, their entertainment from. So trying to relate back the things that they know in their world to the broader world, thinking about the phone, why is or how is that relevant? How is that tied to the space industry? Telling them that, hey, like the camera in your phone and the technology that you have, so much of that stems back from space, from the space industry, trying to explore getting humans to the moon in the 60s and trying to expand their world a little bit to spark that curiosity. So when I saw your 7 points in curiosity, that was the first thing I thought of sparking curiosity in young people, because obviously all of us, I mean, we're all curious and that's what we all have in common and that brings us together. But how do you spark that in kids and trying to make it relevant to them?
Can I just add to that as well, Ashton? Because
Yeah, please
that's
do.
exactly what Steve and I are doing. We're using digital media and e-learning to. We're doing. We've got a lot of news actually, which we can bring up at the end. But yeah, we're using digital technology, media, and gamification to immerse, because you have to use the tools for the younger generation to inspire them, I think.
Absolutely.
And as you're talking about, the STEM programs are invaluable, and the young people, I mean, kindergarten and up, when you're taught to color between the lines, it's been a subject that people have talked about for a long time, but a young person loses an enormous amount of their creativity when they go to school, because they're taught how to do it rather than leaving the creative aspect alone. I've heard it said that the most creative times in life are infancy and senility, when we don't pay attention to anything out there. So yeah. So those of you who are working with young people, I think it's invaluable. You are the examples. They will follow you, and you are designing the future world. We'd like to think our future is our young people. There are our young people. But in reality, you are the future, because you are guiding by example our future world. And that's why I admire you folks so much for taking the reins and committing to getting the word out, spreading the word about the good stuff that's going on. There's a lot of good stuff going on in our world. I always like to look at people say, well, what if this guy gets in office? What if this guy goes here? What if they do this? What if this happens? Well, then look at it this way. What opportunities will arise that we would not have had that not happen? And if you look at that optimistically, it's not a Pollyanna approach at all. Just looking for the opportunities. That's why I think brainstorming is good. We often call it green lighting as well, which leads to the field of association. There is no right or wrong in brainstorming. When you associate things, so someone throws a word in, has nothing to do with what they're talking about, but in reality, it sparks a whole new chain of conversation, which takes us somewhere else. So, other thoughts on this before we move up to one of the last points here?
Yeah, actually, I had one. So I had a similar query when I was working with students in Pakistan, like as Ashton raised the point. A lot of times students didn't knew about, because the community I was serving was a lot of them, they didn't know about like space, and they actually didn't have the opportunity to see through a telescope, and all the knowledge they had was from the textbooks. So I reached out to some guys, and they were really good with the QR stuff. and I printed out some cards that I'll be showing with you. Can you all see this?
Yes.
So this is, you see, this is Mars here, and this is the Curiosity rover. So what it does was, in every classroom, we had a teacher who had a smartphone and internet. And all they had to do was they would scan this QR code, and it will just, the Mars would appear in 3D. And they could just take their phone back and forth, and they could see the polar ice, they could see the terrain of Mars. If they see these things, although they had this rover in their books, but that was really like two-dimensional. They could not feel what was it was. But once they saw through the phone and they could zoom into each part of that, that really made them curious on that subject, because seeing them on the book and seeing them in 3D was a different perspectives, like a paradigm shift for them. So we saw a lot of good response from them, and then we had a couple of sessions with them. Last month I shared some pictures with you of the session, and yeah, there was this approach. It really cost me like about $20 or so, but it just did wonders for the students. So yeah, I'm thinking probably having some more and distributing with the schools that I visit there. And yeah, I would like your feedback on this and how I could improve it.
Thank you very much, Nasser, for sharing that. And thank you for all of the pictures you have sent. I did give some to Michael Stoltz for the article that I wrote on 7 reasons why we must go to Mars. And I took the liberty of mentioning some of you just randomly. I hope you don't mind, because every one of you are doing a job in their own unique style, their own unique way. Some through the writing aspects, some through the speaking aspects, some by simply attending events and going to Halloween parties and New Year's parties and Christmas parties, bringing up the subject and talking about Mars that people just, I think they're eager to hear. So that's very important, and I thank you for it. All right, the last one here is the unwillingness for people to communicate with other countries. This is something that I think is probably, as Zubrin indicated, the most powerful threat to our civilization, and the prohibiting us from actually leaving the planet. I don't want to be an extremist. I don't want to be a naysayer. I don't want to bring the conversation down at the end of our meeting. But if we can't communicate among ourselves, with our spouses, with our loved ones, with our children, with our communities, our countries, our states, we've lost a big part of who we are. We all have a sense about us, like a dog. I'll relate us to a dog. We all meet someone and you either instantly you know that you hate them or you love them. We have that sense about us, and we have to develop that a little bit more. Does anyone have an idea, even if it's simply by association of springing to another area, that you can offer about how we might bring our worlds together? Big subject, but maybe there's a thought that surfaces here that has not surfaced before.
The Mars Society is made to encourage communication. Well, that's why we're an international organization in 40 nations and growing, and we're going to communicate in a lot of languages, a lot of different ideas, and we're all about international communication. We're an internationalist organization.
Okay.
So we're working on that.
Yes, we are. Anyone else quickly? Thank you, Ed. Anyone else quickly? Yes, Dean.
It's a little on the less likely side, but there was a science fiction book. I think it was Arthur C. Clarke. It might have been 2001 or one of the big books. and they said that there was apparently some threat from some, speaking of UFOs, some alien threat. And in the book, that threat united, you're asking about uniting people and bringing people together. And it was this threat that, according to the book, united the US and the Soviet Union. And it's not the best way to go, I suppose, but sometimes disasters and threats can end up uniting people when you recognize there's a common interest. When we see that our interests are not separate from each other, that's maybe the broader point. That's what can pull us together.
Yes, yes. Ed, you're eager to share something, but you need to take yourself off of mute, Ed.
Sorry. A friendly alien non-invasion would do even more to unite us and greet them and say, hey, what do we need to do differently and better down here? And can you give us some help? You know, that would unite. An alien invasion, forget it. We lost. We surrender. Bad aliens. Good aliens, I can handle that.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. And how it's presented is important also.
Yeah.
You may have read the statistics, but when the movie The Martian came out in August of 2015, there were 14 slots available for an astronaut at NASA. And they were not jumping on it to fill the spots. After the movie, I'm going to share with you how many there were. Applications. There were 18,330 applications for that position, those 14 positions after the movie. Don't tell me the big screen doesn't have an effect. Don't tell me that what you are doing by going out and being visible and sharing your sincere feelings about Mars. I had a woman ask me, is there gravity on Mars? I had a guy walk on my walking trail the other day. He said, "What's Mars?" I mean, we are different. We're actually quite different. So what I'd like from you, and I'm going to email this to you, I'd like you to give me your thoughts on what your plans are for 2024. And I'd like you to do it in such a way that I can share this with all of our ambassadors so we can learn from one another. I like your thoughts on the comments that were shared today, your insights of wherever you'd like to go with it, what you might like to share with other people that we all could use and apply in our lectures, in our events that we attend, in the people that we meet. And by doing this and by sharing it, I think we will grow into a larger unit. I will also put out the call for maybe each of you can locate one other person who is interested in becoming a Mars Society ambassador. Now, we've started this in my letter, as you mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, how it started, and we've had about 42 ambassadors step on board. So I really respect you all. You're a great group of kids, and it's just a privilege to be working with you all. I'm going to email you kind of a recap of this program. I'll do the editing of it and get it done shortly and get the actual link to you on the program. But I want to thank you sincerely for what you're doing. And I'd like to hear from you. And I'm going to ask for that in a form that I'm going to send you to kind of fill out and get back to me. So we combine it and maybe take some of the high points and low points of last year and what your aspirations are and what your objectives are for this year as a Mars Society ambassador. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I would like to share a small win with you, with all ambassadors here. The announcement came just 2 days earlier. It was from the Space Agency of Pakistan, Suparco, and I have won the Space Ambassador contest in Pakistan.
Really, congratulations,
Yeah.
Nasir. Thank you, thank you.
So, so yeah, it was like it's my third consecutive year win in Pakistan, and so the thing here was I was competing against other universities and societies, and what was happening there was like they had team of like 15 people and do this outreach stuff, and here I was just alone and with my telescope. Let me show you this telescope you see here. It's like my only Newtonian reflector. It's about like 30 pounds, and I used to carry that on my back. And I had another bag which consisted of my binoculars and instruments. I used to wear that in front, and I would ride my motorcycle to like nearest schools. And in just like there's a week dedicated to space. We call it World Space Week. It's organized by the World Space Week organizations and throughout the world. And in each of the countries, the respective space agencies, they host their events. And I was participating in it as well. And I was like competing with the Space Society of Pakistan. NUST, they had like a team of like 16 people. It was led by 2 PhDs, and there was another society called Airspace Society. There were like around like 14 people, and here I was just me, 2 of my friends, and with our one telescope, I reached out to like 6 schools, and this is while I was wearing the badge, I got this appreciation for the Mars Society. It says thank you for your precious time in our college. Thank you, Nasir and Mars Society.
Excellent.
And yeah,
Thank you very
this
much.
was
A big thumbs up to you for that. And please remember to tune in to Red Planet Live with Ashton Zeth. Quickly, Ashton, please share with us who's coming up this next go around. Looks very interesting.
Dr. Graham Lau. He is an astrobiologist. He also has a show called Ask an Astrobiologist, which is sponsored by NASA. He works on various research projects and is very knowledgeable. He's been on RPL in the past. Good guy. Also works for Blue Marble Space as their lead researcher and the director of communications. So very personable, does a lot of talks. He supports the mission as well. So should be a good conversation. And tidbit, it hasn't been announced, but Tiffany Morgan, Deputy Director for NASA's Mars Exploration Program, she did speak at the conference in October. She's coming up in the next couple of months, I think March. So all of your questions about Moon first, Mars, where should we go first? Please tune into that episode and ask her those questions. I think she's going to show that video that she showed at the conference, that Mars sample return as well. So if you have questions about that, please tune into that episode and ask her your questions.
When does it, what are the details, Ashton? When does it take place? Is it on Zoom?
So we broadcast live. I'm happy to send the link to you. So it's Red Planet Live. We air on the 3rd Tuesday of each month. So it's going to be next week, the 16th. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So I'm trying to look at the calendar, what day it is. The 16th, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Immediately after the episode, it does get posted on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you get your content from. So you can tune in live to ask questions of her, or you can watch it afterwards on any of the streaming platforms.
Great, Ashton. There's nothing too large and nothing too small with what we're doing. I want to thank Ed. I want to thank Emma, Dean, Steve in England, and another Steve White in England, Ginger with that beautiful smile on her face, Nasir, John, Gar, Torsten, Kai in West Africa, and Isaac down there in Africa as well. So much thank you for taking time to join us, and I'll be getting with you very soon on the email with a form. Fill it out, send it back. Let me take a peek at it and see if I can't combine us that way as well. Again, thank you so much. We are the Mars Society. I'm Jim Melton, Chief Ambassador, and my thanks to all of you for what you're doing. And great visions for 2024. And then on to Mars.
Take care.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you, Ginger.
Happy New Year indeed.
Live long and prosper.
Long and prosper, Dean.